Hello boys and girls, it's Aunty Mimmi here. Today we've got a really fun book from the fairies of Cottingley Glen. It's called Queen MAB. If you've not already subscribed to the channel, please do so now. Then sit back, get comfortable and let's begin. It was a beautiful, magical day in Cottingley Glen. The flowers were blooming. The animals were scurrying about in the woods. It was the perfect day for fairies. Do you believe in fairies? Frances asked her cousin Elsie. Oh, yes, Elsie said excitedly. Fairies are wonderful creatures. They are very, very small. They like to hide. But if we try hard enough, I'm sure we can see them. Fairies like to eat cake, said Frances. If we bake some cakes, maybe the fairies will be our friends. Frances and Elsie ran into the kitchen. They gathered all the ingredients of fairy cakes. Frances measured the flour. Elsie got the eggs, sugar and butter, and rainbow sprinkles for the top. When the fairy cakes were done, the girls skipped down the woods. The woods had lots of nooks and crannies to hide in. It was a perfect place to find fairies. Soon Frances and Elsie came to a circle of toadstools. "That's a fairy ring," cried Frances. "Don't step on it," she warned her cousin. "If you do, the fairies will capture you." Elsie carefully placed the fairy cakes inside the ring. "Now what do we do?" she asked. "We have to make a wish for the fairies to come," Frances said. Both girls sat on the ground. They squeezed their eyes shut and wished with all their might. Suddenly the girls heard the most beautiful music. They opened their eyes. Dancing in the centre of the toadstool ring was a tiny fairy. The creature wore a lovely crimson gown made of spider silk. Her wings shimmered in the sunlight. "Hello, my name is Lootie," the fairy announced in a sing-song voice. "I am one of the fairies of Cottingley Glen. Come with me, please. Our queen would like to meet you." Lootie twirled on tiptoes out of the fairy ring. Then, as soft as a breeze, she flapped her wings and flew deeper into the woods. Frances and Elsie could not believe their eyes. They jumped to their feet and followed Lootie. One by one, the fairies of Cottingley Glen appeared. "I am Nanny Putnongcap," said a twinkling sprite. "I am Morgana," said another cheery voice. By the sparkling brook, two more fairies greeted the girls. "My name is Shellycoat," said a rainbow fairy. "And I am Princess Florella," said a mermaid fairy. The fairies took Elsie and Frances to a field full of wildflowers. There another beautiful sprite was sprinkling fairy dust on the flowers. "Hello," whispered the fairy. "I am Tib. It is a pleasure to meet you both." At last, Elsie and Frances reached a beautiful glen. All of the fairies flitted about merrily. Lootie led a glorious chorus of fairy songs. Nanny Button-on-Cap danced with glee. Habertrot, another fairy, was hosting a tea party. The fairies munched on the fairy cakes that the girls had made. It was a grand celebration. Just then, a bungle sounded. The fairies quickly formed two straight lines. The sprites stood at attention as a miniature coach made its way towards Frances and Elsie. The coach was led by a glowing swarm of fireflies. It stopped right in front of Francis and Elsie, and the fairy queen delicately stepped out. "I am Queen MAB," the royal fairy said, and curtsied. "You wished for fairies, and your wish has been granted, but you must promise never to tell anyone about us." "We promise," Francis and Elsie blurted out together. "Very well," Queen MAB said happily. "You are now officially friends of the fairies of Cottingley Glen." Queen Mab waved her golden sceptre, and the sky filled with glittering fairy dust. The fairies fluttered their wings. In the wink of an eye, they vanished. Francis and Elsie smiled at each other. The fairies were real. The girls promised again to keep the fairies' secret forever and ever. And they did. Well, that was a fun book today, wasn't it, boys and girls? Have you ever seen any little fairies flying around? As always, I want you to look after one another, be kind to one another, and try and have some fun every single day. Until next time, bye-bye.